Congratulations! You are in the right place at the right time. This is the Summon Courage, Change Everything podcast with Matthew Levy, an inspiring interview with a guest who has achieved big goals in life and work and who will divulge their secrets to success. Today, now, the man behind the microphone, Matt Levy.
Hello, Summon Courage, Change Everything community. I'm Matthew Levy, the host of the Summon Courage, Change Everything podcast. If you like what you hear, please help spread the word in your networks and leave a 5-star review or equivalent wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. I'm so pleased to have Jason Magidson joining us for this episode. Jason writes on and is passionate about workplaces where people feel truly alive. These are workplaces where employees can create something great together, feel valued, and love coming to work. To share his learnings, Jason has authored 3 books to date. The most recent is Engaged, Creating a Great Organization Through Extraordinary Employee and User Engagement. Jason, his wife, and their 3 daughters live in the Philadelphia area. Jason, welcome. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Matt. So have I.
Excellent. So we're going to have some fun talking about the concept of summoning courage to achieve big goals in life and work. And from knowing you, Jason, you certainly qualify. There's some really interesting things that you've done in your career, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And maybe we could start off with the fact that you shared with me a few weeks ago that you had just published your 3rd book, I think it was. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that project came together for you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So let me just step back probably about 30 years because I got into writing almost accidentally. I had taken a first job out of college in community development and was working in neighborhoods, came up with an innovative program with the neighbors in West Philadelphia. And what happened was one of the local newspapers, actually called University City Review, wanted to do an article. And they said, could we do an article? I said, well, that sounds great. And they're like, here's the catch. We don't have a reporter available to do it. So would you write it? And so that was something that I was interested in. I said, yes. But once I started thinking about it, a little bit of maybe panic set in. So it required me to summon my courage because I was thinking, now I'm like on the spot, maybe potentially hundreds or thousands of people might be reading what I'm writing. And if it's total gibberish, I'm going to put myself out there and look kind of foolish. So I ended up, putting a lot of thought into that. And it forced me to read other newspaper articles, different reporter stuff in the papers. And I really, excuse me, I really saw the format of how they did it. So in some sense, I was forced to sink or swim, but it was really a nice experience because once I did that, I found I had this level of fear of not having done something before. And then once I had done that, I was like, wow, that worked out all right. Worked out pretty well, actually. And then I built my confidence over time. So I think part of the courage-fear balance is, going and doing something and then seeing how that's working out. And then over time, I, did some additional writing. I ended up writing for some academic journals and things like that in my field. And then I worked my way up towards books, and I ended up with 3 books. And the latest book was actually a book called Engaged. It's around creating extraordinary organization, by involving your employees and your users. Yep, there you go. So that was something that, I just, looked at that as writing, various parts of it. So I just started writing, and then it evolved. And I actually did not know what the theme would be for the overall book before I started it. I just said I have these different topics that I'm interested in. So it's something that I think that other people can do if they're thinking of something like writing a book. I think the best thing is to just get started. There's magic in starting something.
Jason, a lot of people think Well, everything that could possibly be written about has been written about, and nobody wants to, hear what I have to say. Do you combat those inner voices that try to beat you down, or how do you overcome that if you do have those voices?
Well, when I started writing this, I was actually writing it for myself because I had worked with a coach, and one of the things that really helped me was determining what I was trying to accomplish with my career and my life. What I was really passionate about, what makes me most alive. So this writing process was a way of getting that documented and for me to clarify my thoughts. And so I wasn't too concerned that, maybe other people think, well, they said it before. And I actually found that I read a lot. I think you know that, Matt. I think we've talked about that. I read lots of books. And I've seen a lot of different ideas. And so some of the ideas even I talk about in my book are other ideas, and I, of course, credit them to the authors. But you can put together ideas from other people in new ways. And so you can come up with really new ways of approaching, say, problem solving or whatever it is your field is. You can come up with new things by combining ideas where other people have not done that before. So I would say for people that are concerned, hey, I don't have anything new to add, I would kind of disagree with that and encourage them to actually start writing and then, see what it comes out. And then at the end of that process, they're going to say, hey, here's what defines what really I'm about. And that then can be something that can actually help their careers because, you put something in writing, it can become like your business card. And you've put maybe years of thought into your particular way of how you approach your profession and your craft.
I love that, Jason. I love the idea of writing for yourself so that you limit the expectations that you have, and it's something that you want to say, you want to get out. I love the idea of clarifying your own thoughts and seeing where it takes you. I read at one point, as it relates to writer's block, just write 2 crappy pages a day. Like if you can just do that, you're going to be fine because they're probably not going to be crappy anyway. And once you start writing, then the thing starts to flow.
Yeah, it's about volume. Once you start to get stuff going, and you could actually, at least the way I wrote, I might have set it down for 2 weeks at a time sometimes if I got tired of it. But it was a 2.5-year process. And I basically, worked on it when I was moved to work on it.
And how do you not sort of get discouraged because it's like a book is it 50 to 80,000 words? How long is a 200-page book like Engaged?
Oh, that's a great question. I knew at one point when I was looking at that, when I was looking at Word, like the word count, but I don't remember offhand, actually.
I think it's about 80,000. So I guess I only brought it up. It doesn't matter what the number is. I brought it up because whatever that is, it's like it could be an overwhelming amount. And there you are sitting with no words and a blank sheet of paper. Isn't it easy to quit? Similar to going to the gym and being all rah-rah and after a week just kind of pooping out?
Well, I think that once you start, you can actually think about it. You can break it up into pieces. And Mark Twain has a great quote, and it's somewhere along the lines of, he says, the secret of getting ahead is to start. And then he says, the key is to really break it up into manageable pieces.
Awesome. Well, you make it seem easier. Like I feel motivated. I'm publishing, I guess you'd call it an ebook soon. I mean, I don't know if that's the right term, but it's 5,000 words and it's 11 leadership lessons from a near-death experience. So I'm now thinking, hey, I got 5,000 words. I have the framework. I'm going to put together this ebook. Maybe I can expand on that over time and then have a legitimate book out of it.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's easier than ever to get something published. You know, you could go the traditional publishing route, which I have done with one of my books, but I like this. You know, this sort of like self-published model. You can, Amazon has a company, and you can work. All you need to do is you send them 2 files. You send them basically the cover file, and you send them the body file. And it has to just follow their format, and then they send you proof. It's just pretty amazing.
Jason, I wanted to talk a little bit about your education background, because I find it very impressive when I speak with folks that have a Ph.D., understanding the amount of years and effort it goes into getting an esteemed degree like that. For yourself, how did you decide to get a Ph.D., and what was the experience like to actually go through and accomplish that?
So I was really interested in the particular field, which has various names. You know, the latest name that people are calling is design thinking. And really, I was very fascinated by involving users in designing things. And those users, they could be customers outside of a business. They could be members of a community. Like my first job, I did community development, where residents in that neighborhood, you involve them in designing and coming up with solutions for themselves. Sometimes it could be employees inside a company who might be using a process or systems. You know, if you're like a healthcare company, it could be the patients and the patient's family that you get involved. And I was really fascinated by the whole area and the potential for involving users in designing things. And one of the things that sparked that was I read an article about what Microsoft was doing in the 1980s. And some people may recall there was a software spreadsheet program called Lotus 1-2-3. And then Microsoft later on came out with something called Microsoft Excel. And what Microsoft did was they took out advertisements in things like Macworld and other publications, and they asked their readers for enhancement ideas. And so they collected thousands of ideas, and they set up a wish fax. People could actually fax in things before the World Wide Web was available. And they got all these ideas and they collected them, and then they built those and they built functionality. And then ultimately that Microsoft Excel program, you know, exceeded what was happening with Lotus 1-2-3 product. And so I was really fascinated by that whole area of involving users. And so I had an area of passion. It's kind of like finding some area in life that you really have energy and passion around. And I wanted to also study with a, you know, really preeminent figure in the field of systems thinking. This was someone named Russell Lakoff, who had recently joined a university that had a lot of flexibility. And so that program they had a PhD program at that university. And so combining my interest in working with some of the best scholars with my interest in, you know, really getting user-driven design be part of what's happening more in the world, like what Microsoft was doing, I said, I want to really study this.
So briefly, you were working full-time, making a good living, and then you decided to hang up those cleats and go be a student, right? I mean, is that how it unfolded?
So I happened to do a program that was really flexible. It was at a university called Union Institute and University. And so it was a university without walls. So I could keep working at the same time I did my PhD. And that was really neat because I actually was working in that field at the same time. So I was able to take my learning that I did typically evenings and weekends, and I was able to apply that on my job, you know, before I was even a quarter of the way through the program. So I was adding value to my profession because I was, you know, really getting better at what I was doing in that profession.
Well, but some might say that that's even more difficult because of the hours that's required. I mean, was this something where you were just going round the clock, working all day, going to school at night, and then your weekends must have been shot for several years? I mean, is that how it unfolded?
To some degree. I mean, I was very busy. Fortunately, like my wife was also going through graduate studies, so we kind of were busy together. So, and we didn't have kids at that time. So that made it, where I was, had fewer responsibilities in terms of that. So I could put that time in.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And our podcast is a lot about talking about finding purpose and meaning, and it giving you, as you say, Jason, significant amounts of energy and resilience to overcome adversity. Now, you explained, I guess, a little bit that your passion started to evolve through reading. Was there any, I don't know, like epiphany or defining moment where you said, this is how I want to spend my career?
Yes, there was. And actually, it goes back to when I was an undergraduate. And this comes back to that same person I mentioned, this Russell Akoff, who, he taught a program where I was an undergraduate. And so he told this really fascinating story, which is actually one of the big themes of my life, really. And this was about Bell Laboratories. And so he had a 30-minute version of that. I'm not going to take 30 minutes, but basically what they did at Bell Laboratories in 1951 was fascinating. And for those who might not be familiar with Bell Laboratories, that was the research and development arm for the Bell telephone system, which was prevalent for most of the 20th century. And so they had invented lasers and satellites, and they actually invented the transistor, and they actually came up with statistical process control, the whole quality movement. They had done a bunch of things, but the head of labs in 1951, this guy Mervyn Kelly, said they weren't being innovative enough, and he told them that they had to pretend that the whole phone system was blown up last night and start from scratch and design the ideal. And so this guy Akoff was on that team that did that, and it was really fascinating. They came up with these innovations, like someone said I could use the phone with no hands, and essentially at the time that really would translate to speakerphone. And then someone said, I could have more than just 2 parties on a phone call, maybe 8 people could call in. And then that would be like, conference calling. And then people also said at that time we'd be able to see people on a phone call, which is in some sense what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Of course, the technology was not so great back then. It was like you might say a word and then 2 minutes later I would see your mouth move or something, So, but they came up with these ideas, and then basically the idea was you need to start where you want to be and work backwards rather than here's where I am today. So that's something that I thought was just brilliant, because prior to that I was thinking, okay, here's how do I improve what I'm doing? But I think that applies for people listening into this podcast, whatever, really whatever profession they are, or maybe for their career or their life. If they identify, okay, where would I ideally like to be today? If I could have whatever I wanted, what would that look like? Paint a picture of that. And then so you're kind of like, after that, you're narrowing the gap between, here's where I want to be, and here's where I am today, and here's where I want to be. And my actions are going to be moving me towards where I want to be, and narrowing that gap.
Yeah, so I'm interested certainly in the whole concept of human motivation, and you touch on that in Engaged as well. One of the sections that jumped out at me because of my interest also was the some of the Frankl work, the Viktor Frankl work. What would you like to say, or what could you say about Frankl's work related to what we were just talking about, people finding their calling and so forth? So
Viktor Frankl, I learned about him through just reading and things, and then I discovered his name, and he, of course, was one of the giants of psychology in the 20th century. But he had written a manuscript, and then he was captured in Europe, and he was put in a concentration camp, and the manuscript was destroyed and lost. And so it was kind of like a culmination of his life's work. And many times he was close to being killed, and he was miraculously survived. But, he, in this Man's Search for Meaning book, he writes about his experiences in the concentration camps, because he was moved around. And it's really fascinating. Some of the people they were unfortunate and got killed. And there were some people that just gave up, and, they didn't have a purpose and stuff. And so he somehow managed to, tell himself that someday, if I survive this, someday this is going to come to an end. And he observed a lot of other people. And then he came to the conclusion at some point that really people with a lot of problems, if they find some meaning, some real important purpose in their life, that can have a lot of those problems melt away. So things like anxiety and addictions and things like that, that can be either diminished or eliminated by finding, some type of meaning in life. And so he founded this whole field called logotherapy. And in that whole area, people, he told people that, your meaning is unique. So no two people's meaning is the same. It's really what you make of your life, what meaning you give to it. So he said, basically, you should search for that meaning. And then, when you find that meaning, reinforce that and, really become passionate about something. And one of the key things about that is to find some way that you're helping individuals or society where you're making a difference for the world. And so he said, people that are doing those types of things can be really, really happy.
Excellent. Right. And Frankl was suggesting that, it could be, the career-related passion, but it could also be passion for your own family and wanting to make sure that they have a better life than you had. So it's interesting. There's anybody can figure out what they really, really, really want to get behind in life. And in summary, Frankl quoted might be pronouncing it wrong, but is it Nietzsche or Nietzsche? How do you say it? Friedrich Nietzsche, and that said, "He who has a why in life can bear any how."
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Yeah, and Frankl uses it, and he thought about it incessantly, just trying to figure out, like, if he could see his wife again, who was captured at the same time, and they went there into different camps. He just kept every day thinking about her, picturing her, thinking, as you say, about what it would be like. And in his darkest moments, he talked about that was one major thing that kept him going. Yeah. Interesting topic. So listeners are used to me talking about the Dream Action Plan, which is a framework, a blueprint that I put together that I think really can help people achieve big goals. And we've started to talk about some of this along the way. We talked about the D, devotion. The R is resolve. And I talk about the importance of goal setting in order to stick with something. What are some thoughts that you might have, Jason, about the importance of goal setting?
I think that can be really important, Matt. I think, like what I was referring to before, in terms of if you can identify like that end point where you want to be, that can then help you lay out your goals. So I'll just kind of give you an example. So like a lot of the work I do has to do with process improvement and involving employees inside a company and in making things better. And so what we do is we identify like whatever process we want to improve. We'll identify what that looks like in its ideal state, and then we'll have a picture of that. And then we identify different things that are going to move us toward that. So in some sense, those are goals. They might be little like small projects, and a lot of times you don't want to just boil the ocean with your overall, set something too ambitious, or I should say, take on implementing something too ambitious. I like to say, I like to think big but start small. So a lot of times you want to get that grand vision, but then you want to start with things that you're actually going to make progress. That's really important. So you set some goals where you're going to get some quick wins, maybe in it might take like a week to 3 or 4 or 6 months, shorter term type things. And that's consistent with some of the research from change management people like John Cotter at Harvard University. He basically looked at different change efforts and saw like which ones succeeded and which one failed. And he came up with 8 different, principles of what you should do. And one of those had to do with making sure that you have some quick wins along the way. So I think it's important for people to, identify that end point where they want to be, and then set some specific things that they want to do that are going to move them there, whether it's writing or whether it's, developing a website for their business or their practice or their nonprofit, or, whatever it is that they're going to do. And then, that's kind of consistent, kind of tying back to Mark Twain, where he talked about, like identifying, starting, but then identifying specific pieces that you can do that are going to, are going to move you in that direction towards your goal.
Did you use some form of actionable goal setting like you were just speaking about to write the book?
I wish I could say that I had a specific target or something. I'm going to do such and such each day, but I guess it was a pretty informal goal. And the goal was really to just try to write, say like when I came home and, after work and I had dinner, just try to sit down for like, say, 5 minutes at least, and then, start writing something. And what I found was when I did that, I would tend to like get away from some distractions, like maybe going on the internet and spending an hour or two surfing around on stuff and then not really having as much to show for it. So that was maybe some way that I had goals, was to try to at least start out doing a little bit of work. And when I would do 5 minutes, that sometimes would turn into like an hour or two. So that was something that helped me.
Yeah, excellent. So how about related to energy? To write a book, you have a busy job, you have your family commitments. How do you get it all done? How do you not burn yourself out, I guess, is the bottom line question.
Well, I guess one of the diversions I have is music. I could go to like live performances of music and stuff. That's pretty inspiring when you see what some of these musicians have done, like the magical compositions they put together, albums and things like that. It's really fascinating to see what they've done and how much enthusiasm they put into it. In some sense, like musicians, can be role models for, I think they can be good role models for people in other professions. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. Some of the newer music, like I like a band called 21 Pilots. There's Arcade Fire that's been around for maybe about, 10 or fewer years. And then of course there's like Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. That's a big one. If you ever seen them in live, it's just amazing how the magic that they put together in their performances. And so you can really draw a lot of inspiration and energy from that by seeing how these guys do it. And that's kind of a fun, relaxing environment. And also, like, for some reason, like just reading a lot's really relaxing and inspiring, and gives me energy too, just to get exposed to different ideas, just to get on that path of finding other ideas out there. And then it just kind of re-energizes you.
Yeah, it seems like we're talking a little bit about that concept of flow, which I'm sure you've read a lot about. In fact, I give you $5 if you can pronounce the social scientist that wrote flow.
Well, I know I knew the name at one point, but that's one thing with names. I'm like, sometimes my recall names, I'll probably remember it in about an hour or two.
Oh, I remember it. I just can't say it. It's Michael Shishafushafu.
Okay, great.
Do you remember who I'm speaking of?
Well, now I can say I can't pronounce it either.
Yeah. But joking aside, flow is what you're speaking about. When Michael Jordan said that in Game 7, ball in his hand, he did not see, end of the game, he did not see the 20,000 screaming fans. He didn't even see the defenders, right? He only saw the basket, and he didn't, everything else was a blur.
Well, there's a lot of great sports analogies with regards to flow. I mean, I remember there was an interview. There was a tennis player, and again, offhand, I don't remember the name. It was a story from maybe like 20, 30 years ago. But the guy said, like after he won the whole big tournament, major tournament, he said, what happened out there? And he said, the ball kept getting bigger and bigger and I couldn't miss it. And so that guy was in flow. He's just, he's totally paying attention to that tennis ball, and he probably didn't see anybody in the stands either. Just like kind of like Michael Jordan. They're getting in that flow, and, stuff's just magical is just happening.
Mm. Yeah. And, my wish is that more people can experience that, because I have a feeling that a lot of people, are toiling away and going through the motions, maybe even sleepwalking as a figure of speech. And boy, you certainly found a way to use your passions, and I have as well, and hopefully others can follow suit.
Yeah, it's really a nice feeling when you can be doing that, and you feel like you're making an impact and you're making a difference in the world. I mean, that's just a great feeling.
So how about attitude? What's your feeling on the importance of having a positive attitude, having a growth mindset?
Well, I think, all of us are going to have bad days from time to time, but I mean, I think if you have, I guess it comes back to like working on something you're passionate about. So if you find something, if you identify what your passion is and you're at least working on that, trying to work on that in some way, each day, that's going to help you have a much more positive attitude. And I think also, for me at least, that whole concept of identifying, where you ideally want to be and working backwards, that's a great way to do that. That helps me have an attitude.
Excellent. Yeah, that's all really great. I appreciate that. The M in the Dream Action Plan is around mastery. We started talking about reading earlier. You mentioned that a few times about your passion for reading. What are a couple of books that you love to give away to others that have been impactful for your life?
So one of them is from this guy, Ari Weinzweig, that I mentioned before. And so his book is called A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach to Building a Great Business. And in that book, he does talk about the visions, and he also talks about the importance of guiding principles. And that reminds me of another book, Tony Hsieh. So it's called Delivering Happiness. So Tony Hsieh, I love that book. I mean, he tells a story like he was early 20s. He was like a tech entrepreneur. And he created a company that eventually was sold to Microsoft for $245 million. Mm-hmm. So his deal was he was going to get $40 million. So he got $32 million in cash. And then he had to stay with the company for a year after it was, went to Microsoft and get another $8 million. And he walked away from that $8 million. And it was because he hated his company. It had a horrible culture. And so he said, he just didn't understand that. He was a young guy. And he said, the next thing I do, I'm going to really focus on creating an extraordinary culture. And so that's what he did. He essentially started a venture capital firm and then gave money to a fledgling company called Zappos. And then they asked him to become the CEO, and then he built this fabulous culture. And ultimately that was acquired by Amazon for $1.2 billion. And, but Tony Hsieh is still the CEO for that. But he has that book, Delivering Happiness, and he tells a story. And, you read something like the Ari Weinzweig's book or Tony Hsieh's, and they're talking about building great businesses where people love being there. And that's what kind of is one of my passions, as you can probably tell.
No, well, you said it well. You know, this is a passion of yours, and it's become a passion of mine as well. So I'm right there with you, and those are some great recommendations. And we'll put links to those books in the show notes, and including Engage, so folks can easily find them. We traded some really interesting quotes already, and that leads me to ask the question about if you could have a billboard that would reach 1 million people a day, what quote or phrase or mantra would you put on there that you want to communicate to these people?
The one that pops into my head is actually too long to recite. There's a Jose Ortega y Gasset, came up with this idea. Basically, he had this idea of people man being able to have an image of something great, and then committing, when I say mankind, mankind having an image of something amazing and great, and then working toward that. So that's like a kind of a long quote. So that would not be good on a billboard, because people would only have a few seconds for that one. But I think one of the ones I already mentioned, like Journey of 1,000 Miles begins with the first step. Mm-hmm. I think getting started. There's probably some good ones around courage that I just, I don't recall specifically right now, because I'm a little bit on the spot thinking of one of my best quotes. That's a little bit of a challenge.
No problem.
Maybe I could flip it back on you. If I were to say, Matt, okay, I have space on my billboard, what would be something you think we should put on there?
One interesting one about getting moving, because you talked about the first step, that would be, there's 2 ways to get to the top of an oak tree. One way is to sit on an acorn and wait, and the other is to climb the tree.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? And Henry Ford, he was the one that said that life is really about figuring out what is your destiny and then doing it. And I like that as well.
Yeah, that's like Thomas Edison's, his, inspiration is was it innovation? Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I think that's what it was.
So Jason, what was the best piece of advice that your mom or dad ever gave you?
It was a little different from advice. They created a space for me. So they were a big space, a huge space. And they were not judgmental about what I was trying to do. They were always very supportive. And it was really, really nice about that. And actually mentioned them in one of the books, kind of the dedication to them. But they encouraged and supported and really gave me great space. And so it wasn't like they told me, do this or do that, but they supported and enabled so that I could believe in myself. And so that was kind of really kind of magical in terms of what they did. But I kind of picked things up along the way, and did the best with what I could with them.
Nice. So we covered a lot of ground for sure. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or bring up that we haven't touched base on yet?
Yeah. So here's another thing too, and it kind of ties back to the whole, the overall theme of courage. So I'm a big fan of Wizard of Oz, and you see, Dorothy and the Lion, and the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, and they're like doing this big journey. And then they go, and then they go and they finally find Oz, and then they find out that Oz is pretty much a fraud. And, when Toto pulls back the curtain, and then Oz says, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And what they realize is that they had all this power all along, so like Dorothy could click her slippers the whole time and go home if she wanted, the Scarecrow, or, I forget all the ones, one needed the heart, and the Lion needed the courage. So they had all this ability and stuff, but they didn't realize it. It kind of brings me back to a story from when I was just about when I was finishing up college. I was doing some stuff in the community. And this was like one of the West Philadelphia communities of Mantua. And I was also, finishing up at the University of Pennsylvania. And I said to this mentor of mine, this guy, Herman Rice, a community development genius, I said, Penn ought to do such and such in the community. And he's like, call the president of the University of Pennsylvania. And I was like, me? I'm just like this lowly student, who am I to call the president? And he's like, why not? And then I was really nervous, but then I was like, okay. So I called, and then I got through to like his assistant and stuff. And she said, well, let me meet with you. And I met with her and told her about the whole thing. And then ultimately I had a meeting with the president of Penn, and then kind of expanded the president of Drexel and the dean of the Wharton School. And like, there's no way I would have thought to do that myself. I would have been kind of afraid to, like, who am I to do that? Like, but then I realized after this kind of mentorship, I was like, that's amazing. That was a gift. Like, who am I not to do that? So like, for people that are saying, okay, I'm afraid to maybe like write an email to the CEO, maybe they should write that email and say, hey, I have this idea. I know stories of people that have done that, and they've like started, the CEO says, oh, that's a great point. Why don't you start the program? And then they change their career completely. So
absolutely. So that's really impactful, Jason, for sure. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. How can the listeners get in touch with you if they'd like to reach you or have any questions?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So they could look me up under Jason Magidson, and that's Magidson. I have one of those names. I probably should have changed my last name to Magazine, and it would have been a lot easier, but I didn't. So that's one way to do it. And then I'm also, my email is jasonmagidson@gmail.com. So I would love to get people's comments, have conversations, maybe share some more books and stuff, ideas if people are interested, whatever it is, definitely would welcome that.
Awesome. Well, we'll put your contact information in the show notes, and I presume that they can get Engaged, the book, from Amazon?
Yes. Probably the best way is there's when you search Engaged, under books, definitely filter by book, and then you'll see things like weddings and engagements. So if you throw my name in there, it'll help. But if you go under books and type in Engaged, it'll be in there somewhere.
Excellent. Well, we'll also have the link, so no sweat there. Hey, Jason, it's been awesome to spend some time with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with our listeners. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, Matt.
To our listeners, please subscribe and rate and share with your networks. I also want to thank Texas Radio Fish for the music, and Levi Dillon at levidillon.com for his amazing podcast engineering. I'm Matthew Levy, and until we speak next time, remember, when you summon courage, everything changes.